Chapter 22. You didn't know Trevor very well, did you? Linda asks Mary as they walk out into the back deck. Mary sighs. He didn't approve of my mother, she says. I think I met him a handful of times. Linda nods. He was a stubborn man, she says, looking across the open area between the house and the small cabin, situated a couple of yards away. He seemed like an asshole, Mary says, and then immediately regrets it. Sorry. Linda chuckles. It's okay. He was a bit of an asshole, but he mellowed quite a bit in his later years. I kind of find that hard to believe. Linda shrugs. I can certainly understand why you would feel that way, she says, before sighing quietly. I want to show you something. She walks down the 3 steps off the deck and heads toward the little cabin in the distance, with Mary just behind. It's far smaller than the main house and looks a little out of place amongst the much more modern buildings. Linda waves to a few people as they walk. How many people do you have here? Mary asks. 16 at last count, she replies. It was more before Zeke and his followers left, I assume. Oh yeah, we were probably at 31 at our peak. They step up onto the small porch that runs from one end of the cabin to the other, and Linda grabs the doorknob. It might smell a bit musty in here, she says. We don't go inside much. Why not? Mainly out of respect. This was Trevor's house, and it just doesn't seem right. Linda opens the door, and they're immediately hit with the stale air. It doesn't smell bad, just old. It could do with a good airing out, Mary says. Agreed, Linda replies, before walking over and opening the 2 windows that flank the front door. That should help. You can get the light switch. Mary turns to the right and flips it up. The 2 bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling illuminate, casting a dull light across the interior. Inside, it looks nearly identical to John's cabin in the woods. The same kitchen layout, similar table and chairs. Even the decorations are close. Like father, like son, Mary mutters to herself. What's that? Linda asks, looking up from the desk in the corner, where she's pulling something out of one of the drawers. Oh, nothing. Linda carries a pile of papers over to the kitchen table and sets them down. Come sit, she says, waving Mary over. Mary looks down at the collection of faded papers and envelopes with uncancelled stamps. What is all this? She asks, picking up one of the sheets. These are letters that Trevor wrote to John. What? She examines the paper in her hand, her eyes flitting across the surprisingly delicate handwritten script. John, I don't know what to say to you that will ever change things between us. I know that I haven't been the father that you deserved, or the husband that your mother needed. But you need to know that I love you. I've always loved you, even though I didn't say it as much as I should have. Love, Dad. Mary flips the paper over and then looks at Linda. Are you sure that Trevor wrote this? She nods and smiles at her. He wrote them all right. I never heard a kind word out of him. Certainly nothing that could have been construed as love. I understand what you're saying, but like I told you, he mellowed in his later years. Mary scans through a few more of the loose papers. Each one is an individual letter, all of them no more than a couple of sentences. How many are there? More than 100. Mary sits in stunned silence and then picks up one of the envelopes. He never mailed them. Linda frowns and shakes her head. No, he wrote them and then just put them in a drawer. She picks the letter up and looks at it before lowering it again. My dad said the same thing to me a couple of days ago, that Trevor wrote here all these years ago. Like father, like son, Linda says. grinning at Mary. Who are the best fighters? John asks as he, Laurie, Anna, Ray, Victor, and Gregory are sitting around the large kitchen island. Everyone looks at everyone else, and no one responds right away. Don't be shy and don't worry about hurting anyone's feelings. This is serious. So those kinds of things need to be set aside. John says, Laurie, speak up. Well, if you want the honest answer, I would say Victor and myself, with Anna, Rebecca, and Dean in a close second. Hey, Anna says, protesting lightly. Who's the better shot? Laurie asks. Anna frowns. Fine, you are. So you're a good shot. What about the rest of you? I'm okay, Victor says, although I'm better at hand-to-hand fighting. Good to know. Rebecca is a crack shot with a hunting bow, Anna says. What about Stasia? John asks. Oh, shit, I forgot about her. Axes are her things. Axes? Yeah, you know those places where you go to throw axes for fun? Yeah. She used to own one. I saw her take down a deer one time. John leans back slightly and grins. With an axe? Yes, sir. That could come in useful, John says, before turning to Gregory. And what's your story? I'm not much of a fighter. What can you do? I can build anything you want out of anything you have. A MacGyver? You could say that. That could come in quite useful, John says, before turning to Anna. And you? I'm just a badass overall. Ask anyone. We'll talk about that later, John says. There are other people here who can fight, and those that can't will still defend this place to the end, Ray says. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Yeah, but we need to be realistic. This Zeke is an obvious sociopath. If he was willing to kill Rebecca, someone that he knew, without a second thought, then you all need to understand that he will have no compunction about killing each and every one of you. That's something I think everyone needs to understand. We get it, Laurie says, and Anna nods her head. I know you get it, but you have how many people here? 16, Ray says. How many children? There are 3, not including your 2. John nods. Okay, so we need a meeting with all 13 of your people so we can talk about this. Ray nods. I'll get that arranged. How many people does Zeke have? 12 people went with him when he was banished, Anna says. Did you recognize those other people with him on the road? John asks, looking at Laurie. No. Then we have to assume that we're outnumbered. Are we going to be able to win this? Victor asks. I'll have to get back to you on that. Chapter 23. John, after your mother died, I know that I was pulling away from you. I knew you needed even more, but I was so consumed with grief that I couldn't see it through my own anger and pain. All I could think about was what I had lost, not what you were going through, and I'm so sorry for not being there for you. Dad. Jake? Mary calls from the porch of the big house. Yeah, Mom? He shouts back, but she can't see him. Where are you? In the goat pen. Well, it's time to get ready for bed. Okay, I'll be right there. Mary re-enters the kitchen and leans for a moment on the counter before turning when the door opens. Her mouth drops open when she sees Jake standing just inside the door. What the heck happened to you? She asks. He is literally caked in mud from head to toe. Delia was teaching me how to wrangle the goats and chickens, he says proudly. Did you wrestle them? She asks, shaking her head. I fell down a lot. No kidding, she says, smiling at him. Come on, we gotta get you cleaned up. Maybe a hose might do the trick, Robin says as she walks into the kitchen. Maybe we should use a hose on you, Jake retorts, and Robin shakes her head. Nice one. She fills a glass with water and walks out the way she came in. Mary pats him on the back. That was a good try. Thanks. Anyway, go back out on the porch and take off your shirt, shoes, and pants. Then I'll be naked. You won't be naked. You have underwear on, right? He stands there for a minute without answering, and Mary sighs and shakes her head. That's kind of gross, Jake. Fine, just take off your shirt, socks, and shoes, and leave them out there. He heads back out onto the porch, and Mary waits on one of the stools. Linda walks in and smiles at her. Evening, she says. Evening. Linda walks over to the sink and washes her hands. Did you need something? She asks, while drying her hands on a small towel. Just waiting for Jake. He's taking off his dirty clothes out on the porch. He didn't have to do that, Linda says with a soft chuckle. This is a farmhouse. It gets dirty. You don't understand. I wouldn't let him in the barn in those clothes, she replies, laughing along with her. I wanted to ask if your rooms are okay. Oh, yes, they're fine, and you didn't have to give us 2 of them. Listen, no 14-year-old boy wants to share a room with his sister. I don't want to share a room with a 14-year-old boy either, Mary says, grinning at Linda. I get that. Anyway, we'll find y'all something better soon, but right now all the rooms are taken. It's okay. We're grateful for anything we can get. Just then, Jake opens the door and peers inside. I'm ready, he says, leaning around the door. Come on, Mary says. Let's get upstairs and get you washed up. He steps inside and smiles at Linda. Hi, Miss Linda. Hello, Jake. You have fun today? I did, thank you. I love the goats and chickens. Delia teach you a lot? She did, he says, as Mary starts corralling him toward the stairs. Say good night, Mary says. Good night, Miss Linda. Good night, Jake. Sleep well. The goats will be waiting for you tomorrow. He smiles at her and then runs down the hall to the stairs. Have a good night, Linda, Mary says. You too, dear, she replies, before stepping over and wrapping her arms around her. They hug each other like family for a few seconds, before Jake shouts from upstairs. You coming? I'm coming, she shouts back, as she and Linda end their embrace. See you in the morning. Well, what do you really think is going to happen here? Laurie asks, as she and John sit on the front porch, their legs hanging over the edge. I'm not really sure. Are you not really sure, or you just don't want to say? I seriously don't really know. I believe that everyone here would like to think that they will fight to the bitter end to defend this place. But in all honesty, that kind of courage is hard to find. Laurie nods and takes a drink from her glass, pausing for a moment to let the bourbon slide down her throat, and the burn to come back up. We don't want to lose this place, she says, and certainly not to someone like Zeke. I don't want to lose it either. I'll do anything I can to help. That's what we need. John nods and takes a sip from his glass, before setting the tumbler back on the deck board. How long have you been here? He asks. Close to 17 years now, she replies. Seriously, you must have been young when you first arrived. I was 8 when my parents moved us here. That must have been tough, moving to a place like this. She shrugs. I was always a bit of a loner. I mean, I was an only child, and I never really liked people, she says, grinning at him. Have I met your parents? She sighs quietly. No, they both died. Oh, God, I'm sorry. It's okay. It's been a while. Dad had a heart attack when I was 10, and Mom was killed in an accident while we were clearing ground for one of the outbuildings about 2 years later. John shakes his head. That must have been tough. It was, but Ray and Linda were amazing, as was your dad. John stares at her, his mouth hanging open slightly. My dad? Yeah, she replies, nodding slowly. After my mom died, he told me I could stay. In fact, he told me that I had to stay, and that he and the others would take care of me. John frowns and then lowers his head, and Laurie puts her hand on his back. It seems like he was a better parent to you than he was to me, he says. He told me one time that he regretted the way things ended between the two of you, that you deserved better. It doesn't make up for it, John says, somewhat bitterly. I know it doesn't, and I think he knew that too. John sighs and looks across the wide open space in front of the house toward the woods. You spent a lot of time with him, huh? John asks, after a few moments of silence. I did. He taught me how to fish, how to hunt, how to shoot, how to find my own way in the wilderness. Survival skills. Exactly. He taught me the same things. They both fall back into a comfortable silence as the sun makes its final stand, before surrendering the sky to the moon. I think that's why he left you this place. Why? To try and make up for everything, or at least make a start of it. Maybe. Laurie downs the last of her drink, and then jumps down off the porch. I'm pretty sure I'm right, she says. So, let's not let that fucking nutcase burn the place down. I'll do my best. Night, John. Night, Laurie. John picks up his glass and heads to the door. But before he touches the handle, it opens, and Ray stops short. Sorry, he says. I've got something to show you. Something to show me? It's getting kind of late and kind of dark. I know, but trust me on this. Okay. Ray leads John back through the kitchen and to a door that opens to a staircase that leads down into the basement. They descend the stairs to the slightly musty but cool cellar. They walk down a narrow aisle between a row of plastic and wooden barrels full of dried rations like beans, flour, rice, and oatmeal. Where are we going? There's something you need to hear. Hear? Yeah, Ray says, as he stops in front of a large steel door. He pulls it open, and they walk into a small, dimly lit room, lined with old radio equipment. The walls and ceiling are covered with an odd-looking foil insulation-like material. Faraday? John asks, looking around. Exactly, Ray replies, before sitting down in the single chair and hitting a switch on the side of one of the pieces of equipment. He adjusts a few dials, and after listening to static for a few seconds, a voice drifts out of the small speakers on top of the unit. Any idea where the pulse came from? But it has resulted in nearly complete failure of all electrical infrastructure across the entirety of the United States. This outage extends to all computer-controlled systems, including mechanical, financial, and vehicular. At this time, limited units in the National Guard and regular Army units have been dispatched to help bring people to safe locations. Once again, we have no ETA on when electrical power will be restored, and no idea when help will be coming to those left stranded by this unprecedented event. We have confirmed that our allies in Europe, South America, Africa, and Asia are all experiencing the same phenomenon, as have many of our adversaries. Please try to remain calm and cooperate with any military units that you encounter. We will update this recording with new information as it is received. God bless the United States of America. Message repeats in 30 seconds. Ray switches the radio off and turns and looks at John. So, he says. So, I guess we're on our own. Chapter 24. John, I've decided to try and expand the homestead. I've discovered a few people of similar mindset, and we are going to make this place something special. I hope that you'll be able to see it someday. We did have some happy memories here. At least a few, I hope. Dad. So what is it we need? John asks as he and Laurie are loading the last of their supplies into the back of the Scout. Our first aid inventory is pretty low, and anything else that you can find would also be welcome. Ammunition, food, or gasoline, Ray says. John nods. We'll bring back everything we can find. I told you I can go, he says. John turns and looks at him as Laurie closes the tailgate. You said we needed to pull our weight. This is me pulling, John replies, while putting his hand on Ray's shoulder. Be careful, Ray says, nodding slowly. Ditto that, Mary says from the porch. Max is sitting next to her, looking ready to jump down at any moment. We will. Everyone ready? John asks as he climbs into the truck, settling in behind the wheel. Victor! Laurie shouts, and the big man comes jogging around the side of the barn, 2 rifles slung over his shoulders. I'm coming. Shotgun, Laurie says, before jumping into the front seat. Victor just shakes his head as he opens the back door and loads the 2 rifles. He climbs in and shuts the door behind him. Suddenly, Max bolts from the porch and runs over to the Scout and stands up at the driver's door. Sorry, Max, you have to stay home this time, he says, petting his head. He runs back to the porch when Mary calls him back to her side. All right, can we get moving? Victor asks. John just shakes his head. We'll be back as soon as we can, he says to Mary and Ray. Make sure you do, she calls to him, and he starts the engine and pulls out, heading down the long, gravelly driveway. When they reach the gate, Dean walks up to the truck and leans on the door. You 3 take care of yourselves, he says. I'll make sure they don't do anything stupid, Laurie says, leaning toward the window. That's not much comfort, he replies with a laugh, while Rebecca swings the gate open. John laughs, and they give each other a high five as he drives through the opening and to the end of the driveway. I'm assuming it's that way, John says, pointing to the right. You got it, Laurie replies. He pulls out onto the highway, and they speed away, leaving the safety and security of the homestead behind. How far is it? Maybe 15 miles. That's great. Nothing closer? Does it look like there's anything closer? Laurie asks, looking out the windows at the endless parade of trees. I suppose not. Are we even sure there's going to be anything there? It's been 3 weeks since the blackout, Victor says from the back seat. That's a good point, but I guess we have to try. I'm hoping that the National Guard came by and rounded everyone up. Is that what they're doing? Mary said they told you guys to head back to town. It's more like they were just confining people to their own homes. True, but we have to hope for the best. How's that working out for you so far? She asks. Is that it? John asks, while they're all lying on the ground, peering through binoculars at the tiny hamlet in the distance. They're perched on a hilltop, high above the city. What were you expecting, a Walmart in the mountains? Laurie replies. Is it even worth going down there? I can only see 2 or 3 businesses. There's a drugstore, small grocery store, and a gas station, Victor says. And 2 restaurants, Laurie adds. All right, then, if you say so, John says. You see any people? They each study the town for a few minutes, sweeping their glasses back and forth. I got no one, Victor says. Me either. Good. Let's hope they're not just all hiding inside. Let's go. They all head back to the Scout and climb aboard. Victor hands one of the rifles over the seat to Laurie as John starts them down the long road that descends to the tiny town of Buellton. We all stay together, okay? John says. Gotcha, Laurie replies. We move quickly, we move quietly, we move carefully. Sounds like a plan. About halfway down the road, John slows them down. Laurie, keep an eye out. Yes, sir. They creep forward, the only sounds coming from the tires on the asphalt and their own controlled breathing. The road levels out and they roll into the outskirts of the little settlement, past a collection of small houses. Abandoned cars and trucks dot the road, while others sit with their hoods up in the driveways of the modest dwellings. The trio constantly scan the area, their eyes flitting from one spot to another, searching for any sign of movement. But other than a rabbit, squirrel, or the occasional deer, the place is like a ghost town. A thought suddenly enters John's head. Where does Zeke have his headquarters, for lack of a better word? He asks. I don't think anyone knows. It's not here, is it? Laurie looks at Victor, who shrugs and then shakes his head. We don't think so. There's not a lot of conviction behind that answer. Best we got, Laurie replies. John spots a small blue and white house with a GMC SUV outside, with its hood up, and pulls into the driveway. What are we doing? Victor asks. We're being careful. We can't risk losing the truck, and the stores are only 2 blocks away, John says, as he drives the Scout around the back side of the house, parking under the elevated deck. Come on. They all exit the truck, leaving the doors open. John climbs the dozen or so wooden steps up to the rear porch of the house and peers inside through the sliding glass doors. It looks empty, he says, before knocking on the door and taking a couple of steps to the side, pushing the others behind him so they can't be seen. After a couple of minutes, he tries the door, and it easily slides open. Hello? He calls inside, while standing with his back against the wall. I don't think anyone's home, Laurie says. Yeah, I got that. Do you remember what I said? We move carefully. You also said we move quickly and quietly, but this seems like neither one of those, she replies. John sighs and shakes his head before they head inside. The interior is cleaner than expected, but there are still signs that the residents left with only a few minutes' notice. A half-drunken cup of coffee on the kitchen counter, an open loaf of bread sitting near the toaster, and the closet nearest the front door is open, a couple of coats and other belongings scattered on the floor. Looks like they cleared out, Victor says. Or got cleared out. True that. All right, John says. We go for the pharmacy first, and then we'll try the little grocery store. He peers through the binoculars at the front doors of both businesses. The glass in the windows of both buildings is smashed, and there are some items littering the sidewalk out front. Somebody's already been here, Laurie says, lowering her own glasses. Yeah, but I figured that'd be the case. It's been 3 weeks. Still worth checking, though, right? It's still worth checking. They dash across the street and down the alley behind the row of short brick buildings that form the business district on the opposite side of the road from their goals. A few rats scurry away into dark corners as they approach, and John stops next to a door built into the brick wall. Crowbar, he says to Victor, who steps forward, slides the bent tip into the space between the door and the frame, and pulls hard. The old wood splinters easily, and John pulls the handle, and the door opens. They slip inside, and Victor pulls it shut behind them. It takes a minute for their eyes to adjust to the darkness in the narrow hallway that is crammed with dusty cardboard boxes. What the hell is all this? Laurie mutters to herself as she opens the flap of one of the cartons. She pulls a brightly colored plastic vase out and turns it around in her hands. Pretty, but useless, she says, sliding it back into the box. This must be the old flower shop. It's been closed for years. They move down the hallway to a silver-colored flipping door. John peers through the small central window, but it's impossible to see anything outside because of the thick black paint that coats the front window. He steps through the opening, holding the door open for Laurie and Victor. The air smells musty, almost moldy, as they look around the long-abandoned shop. A small counter near the front door still supports an older cash register, and a line of glass-fronted coolers line most of the walls. A few dried and withered flowers offer proof to the store's history. John moves to the window and squats down on the floor, below the edge of the windows. Using his finger, he scrapes the paint off a small section of the glass and looks across the street at the front of the pharmacy. The damage to the facade of the little store is even more extensive than he first realized. Both doors are broken, the left one hanging crookedly in the opening. He sighs and looks back at Laurie. "Can we unlock this door?" he asks, and she walks up and tries the bolt. It opens surprisingly easy. "It's all good." "Disable that," John says, pointing up to the little brass bell hanging on a coil of tarnished copper. Victor walks over and reaches up, grabs the bell and pulls it until it breaks free, his hand muting the sound of the chime. "All right," John says. "Here's the plan. Laurie and I are going in. You're going to stay here to watch our backs." Victor nods. "Gotcha. Good. You see anyone, you fire one warning shot." "One warning," he says, nodding. "If that doesn't do it, you know what you have to do." He nods, a grim expression on his face. "You ready?" John asks Laurie. "Ready." Chapter 25. John, do you remember that time we went fly fishing down on the river, and you slipped on that rock and fell in? I should have jumped in right away to pull you out, but I just let you struggle. I thought I was toughening you up, but now I realize I was just pushing you away, starting you down the path of hating me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Dad. Laurie and John dash across the street, briefly taking cover behind an abandoned Ford pickup truck, before covering the last couple of yards to the front door of the pharmacy, while Victor watches through his rifle scope from inside the flower shop. "Shall we knock?" Laurie asks. "I think someone already did," John replies, looking at the shards of glass scattered across the sidewalk. "But we should probably check." John picks up an empty Coke can and tosses it inside, making sure that it makes a significant amount of noise. After waiting a few seconds for a response, John nods at Laurie, and they slip inside. The interior of the pharmacy is exactly what John was expecting. Shelves overturned, products scattered everywhere, and the glass that used to cordon off the pharmaceutical counter is smashed. "Jesus, this is bad," Laurie says, as they move through the chaos, stepping carefully over the spilled products. "This is what happens." "Should we look through the stuff?" she asks. "We probably should. If we ever come back here, there'll be even less to take." They start going through the sea of items strewn on the floor, concentrating on the areas that used to house the first aid supplies and over-the-counter medications. After about 15 minutes, they have a nice selection of products, carefully stacked at the end of one of the aisles. "Can I ask you something?" John says. "Sure." "Don't you think it's odd that we haven't heard from Zeke for more than 3 weeks?" Laurie stops, sorting through a pile of feminine products, and looks at John. "Maybe you scared him off." "Do you think that's true?" "No," she says, shaking her head. "Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. He's planning something, gathering his strength." "I guess he could be," she replies, a worried expression on her face. "Do you think we should check behind the counter?" "We're already here. We might as well." They head to the pharmacy counter and slide across, pushing bits of shattered glass onto the floor in the process. The state of the shelves in this area is even worse, with bottles scattered everywhere and loose pills spilled on the floor. "Grab anything that ends in Prill, Statin, Cillin," John says, as he starts scanning the shelves for anything useful. He grabs a small, bright red plastic tote in the corner, with the word McKesson stamped on the front, and starts loading it with bottles, including metformin, gabapentin, and levothyroxine. Most of the pain medicines are already gone, but Laurie manages to locate a few odd strengths of ibuprofen and acetaminophen. The small safe tucked under the counter is open, the door having suffered a tremendous amount of damage from a variety of tools. Almost all of the bottles inside are missing. "I'm sure that was their controlled drugs," John says. "The good stuff." "Yeah, the good stuff." "I kind of figured they would be gone, but we got some good stuff. Let's get out of here." John picks up the plastic bin and slides it across the counter, before doing the same with himself. Laurie follows right after, and they head to the door after loading a couple of cardboard boxes with the other supplies they discovered. John looks out the front door and immediately freezes. Victor is standing on the sidewalk in front of the flower shop, unarmed. "Stay back," John says. "Give me your rifle." "What's wrong?" Laurie asks as she hands the weapon to him. "Everything." "John," someone calls from across the street. "Is that him?" John asks Laurie. "I've only heard him speak once." "That's him," Laurie grumbles, before snatching the pistol out of John's belt and pulling the slide back. "What do you want?" John shouts back, while carefully peering around the corner. There are 4 other men standing nearby, all of them armed. He can't see any vehicles, but they must be close. "That's not very polite. We should at least introduce ourselves." "Why? I already know all about you, and you don't need to know anything about me. I doubt that we're going to become friends." "I didn't think so either. I just wanted to make sure that I was sending this message to the right person, since you seem to be Ray's new dog." "What message?" He pulls a pistol out of his belt, raises it to Victor's head, and fires before John even has time to react. "Fuck!" John shouts. "Victor!" Laurie screams, before standing and opening fire on Zeke and his men through the shattered window. She takes down one with a shot to the chest, but the others, including Zeke, dive for cover behind derelict vehicles or empty storefronts. John grabs Laurie and pulls her down just as a hail of bullets strike the front of the store, spraying bits of glass and metal inside. John looks at Laurie, locking eyes with her, even as tears slide down her cheeks. "We're getting out of here," John says. "What about Victor?" Laurie asks, her voice cracking. "Victor's gone. We need to look out for ourselves." "I'm not leaving him here." John sighs and shakes his head. "All right," he replies. "Follow my lead, stay close, and shoot to kill." "I got no problem with that." John stays low and scrambles down one of the aisles towards the door that looks like it leads to the back room. As soon as they're off the floor, John jumps to his feet and they run to the back door. John pushes it open slowly and peers outside. No one opens fire on him, so he grabs Laurie's hand and they run down the alley to the corner of the last building in the business district. "Down," he whispers, as they slowly move along the side of the building toward the street. John takes a quick peek down the street and immediately spots Zeke and his men, still crouched behind the vehicles. Zeke is saying something, but they're too far away to hear it. "We only have a few seconds. They're going to figure out in a minute that we're not there," John says. Laurie nods her understanding. "We're going to rush them," he says. "But we're outnumbered." "Exactly. This is the last thing they're going to expect. And if you throw any enemy off their game, they make mistakes." "They miss." "Yep, they miss, and we don't." Laurie takes a deep breath and releases it slowly. "Are you ready for this?" John asks. "I'm ready." John stands and leans around the corner, sighting the first of Zeke's 3 remaining men. He adjusts his aim slightly and fires before rushing forward. The shot tears into the man's right shoulder and explodes out his left, throwing him into a small tree planted along the sidewalk. Laurie screams as she runs, firing at a steady rate. taking down a second target with a shot to the neck. Zeke and his final companion take off, running down the street while firing wildly. John grabs Laurie and pushes her down behind a small sedan. She glares at him. "Why did you do that?" she shouts at him. "I could have gotten him." "Now's not the time," John says. "We accomplished what we stayed for." He looks toward the lifeless body of their friend and companion, and Laurie lowers her head. "I'm sorry," she says, and John nods his head. "No need for that. You did good, and we'll get Zeke when the time comes. Running after him while he's firing willy-nilly is a good way to get killed. Besides, we don't know if they have any additional people here or not." "You're right," she replies, as they jog over to Victor's body. She drops to her knees and closes his eyes while sobbing quietly. "Laurie, I need you to run back to the house and get the scout," John says, while watching down the street where Zeke and his men fled. She nods and wipes her face. "Keys?" He tosses them to her, but just before she leaves, she stops and looks at him. "I'll be right back. Stay safe." "I will." Chapter 26. John, this place is really coming together. I found a few more people who are willing to take on this project with me. They seem like good, honest, hard workers. Their names are Ray and Linda, and I think with their help, we can finish the farmhouse. I just wish you were here to see it with me, to help me build it. But I know that will probably never happen. Dad. Laurie is in the back seat, cradling Victor in her lap, while John races down the highway back toward home. The boxes and totes rattle and shake in the cargo bed, with every pothole and bump they pass over. "I'm sorry about what happened," John says, glancing at Laurie in the rear view. She looks up, her eyes watery, but her tears have been replaced with a stern expression. "It wasn't your fault," she says. "I was in charge, so I'm responsible." She shakes her head. "We're all adults, John. We all made a choice. Victor chose to come with us. He knew the risk. Zeke is to blame for this, and Zeke alone." John sighs and begins to slow down as they approach the turnoff for the homestead. "If I'd planned things more carefully, maybe—" "Stop it right now," Laurie says, her tone much more forceful. "I don't even want to hear you talking like that." "I can't help it," John says, as he pulls up to the gate. The moment that Dean sees them, he frowns, and after opening the gate, he steps up to the scout and glances in the back. "Oh, Jesus," he says. "What happened?" "Zeke," Laurie says, and Dean just shakes his head. "Motherfucker," he says, while watching the road behind them as John drives through the opening. Rebecca steps out of the trees and looks at Dean. "What's wrong?" "It's Victor." She steps up to the truck and puts her hand over her mouth before looking at Laurie. "Are you two okay?" she asks. "We're okay," John says. "Well, that's something, I guess." "Can we get an extra person on front gate duty?" John asks. "Because you and I need to talk, Rebecca." Sure. Meet me back at the house in about half an hour." John nods and starts down the driveway toward the main house. "Did he have family here?" John asks, realizing that he knew almost nothing about their fallen companion. "Not that I know of," Laurie replies quietly. "Good," John says, breathing a sigh of relief. "It doesn't make things any easier," Laurie says, putting John's thoughts into words. "I know." They pull up in front of the house, and Ray and Mary step out onto the porch. The second that she sees John's face, she knows something is wrong. She jumps down, skipping the steps and rushing over to the scout. She starts to ask what happened when she glances into the back seat. "Oh, God," she mutters. John shakes his head and climbs out. Ray descends the steps and John walks over to him. "I'm sorry," he says, and Ray pulls him into a powerful hug. "It's not your fault," he says. And a moment later, Laurie joins them, the three of them holding tightly to each other. Robin steps out onto the front porch. She looks at the trio of mourners and then at her mother. "Get a blanket," Mary says. She nods without saying a word and rushes back inside. A few seconds later, she bounds down the steps and rushes up to the scout, the blanket in hand. "Stay back," Mary says, as she struggles to get Victor covered properly. "Why?" Robin asks, as she moves to the other side of the truck and puts her hand on the door handle. "I'm going to see this sooner or later based upon what you've been talking about." She opens the door and catches a glimpse of Victor's face, and the wound that exposes a portion of his skull underneath. She pauses for a moment, but she swallows her fear and gently covers him. She walks around to Mary's side and throws her arms around her, pulling her close as a few tears trickle down her cheeks. "How did you get captured?" John asks Rebecca, as they're sitting at the kitchen island, joined by Ray, Laurie, and Mary. "I was out gathering near the front quarter, looking for mushrooms, berries, and nuts, when something hit me from behind. The next thing I can remember, Zeke was glaring at me." "Where is this front quarter?" "It's where it sounds like it is," she replies with a wry grin. "It runs along the highway off to the west and then back a mile or so." "Any idea how they found you?" She pauses for a moment, and then her brow furrows. "No, not really." "They're spying on us," John says. "That's how they knew we were going to Buellton," Laurie says. Ray shakes his head. "We would have spotted them by now," he says. "We have people patrolling the woods all the time." "I'm not saying that he's sending people here to watch us. I'm saying someone is spying on us." "Someone in the group?" Ray asks, a stunned expression on his face. "That's what I think." "It makes sense," Laurie says. "It's too coincidental." "Let's think about this logically," Mary says. "You said that when Zeke left, a bunch of people went with him." "Yes." "What about people who didn't go with him who still felt like he was innocent?" "Well, the ones I know, it couldn't be, are me, Linda, Laurie, Rebecca, Stasia, Dean, Dahlia, and Gregory," he says, "as well as Anna and the kids, of course. That just leaves Robert, Jason, and Phil." "Who are Robert, Jason, and Phil? Have I met them?" "I don't think so. They tend the cattle and sheep on the far side of the ranch. There's a small cabin where they live, so they don't have to come check to the main house every day." "If you're sure of everyone in this room and the others on your list, then we need to go out and pay the other three a visit," John says. Ray shakes his head. "I can't believe that one of them is spying for him," he says. "Ray, come on," Laurie says, frowning at him. "What? What is it?" John asks. Laurie waits for a few seconds for Ray to answer, but when he doesn't, she sighs. "Jason never believed that Zeke did what he did," she says. "Yeah, but he voted for him to be banished at the meeting." "That could have been planned," John says quietly. "A long-term strategy." Ray sits for a moment and then slaps the table. "Fuck! Let's go see them," he shouts angrily. 20 minutes later, John, Ray, and Laurie are riding hard and fast across the fields between the acres of corn and wheat, just north of the farmhouse. Laurie has her rifle strapped across her back, and Ray has an old level-action Remington stuck in a leather scabbard, tied to the side of his mount. John's pistol is tucked into his belt, the tail of his shirt flapping in the breeze as he rides. Laurie drifts her horse slowly over beside him, and she smiles. "You ride pretty good for a city slicker," she says. "It's like riding a bike. My dad and I used to ride all the time before things got bad between us." "Yeah, he told me about that," she says. They climb a small ridge, stopping at the top for a moment. A large tower, perhaps an abandoned fire lookout, looms large, soaring above their heads. A small wooden cabin is situated at the bottom of the hill, nestled in amongst the trees. A few dozen cows and sheep are dotted across the landscape, grazing happily on the bright green grass sprouts. "I'm assuming that's it," John says. "That's it," Ray replies. He hasn't said a word since leaving the house, his normally friendly and open expression replaced with a much darker version. "Let's go," he says, before spurring his house down the hill. John looks at Laurie, and she gives him a quick nod, and they move out, close on Ray's heels. Laurie swings her rifle around front as she rides, holding it in one hand as she guides her horse with the other. They approach the cabin like three deputies straight out of the Old West. There's a small campfire burning just outside the house, with 3 chairs set around it. Ray stops a few yards from the front porch of the cabin and climbs off his horse, grabbing his rifle out of its sleeve. Laurie and John are just behind him, dismounting and following Ray as they close in on the house. "Jason, Robert, Phil," he calls out. "Anyone home?" The front door opens, and a tall, rugged man with a dark beard steps out, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. "Ray?" he asks, a confused look on his face. "What are you doing here?" "Phil, where's Jason?" He and Rob are down by the river, refilling our water jugs." Ray nods and looks around. "How long before they get back?" Ray asks. "What's going on?" Ray sighs and walks past Phil and steps up on the porch. He peers through the window into the cabin and then walks back over to the edge of the deck. "What is going on, Ray? You're acting weird," Phil says. "Victor's dead." "What? He's dead? What happened?" "Zeke killed him." "Motherfucker. I always told you I hated that son of a bitch. How did it happen?" "He ambushed us down in Buellton," John says, and Phil turns to him. "Who are you?" "This is John," Ray says. "He's just joined us." Phil gives him a nod of the head, which John returns. "How the hell did he find you in Buellton?" Phil asks. He always hated that place. Or rather, they always hated him there. "That's what we're here to find out," Ray says. For a moment, Phil stares at Ray, and then it dawns on him. "You think Jason has something to do with it?" he asks. "I don't know. That's what we're trying to find out." "How long until they get back?" Laurie asks, while she's walking around the far side of the cabin, repeating Ray's unanswered question. Before he can even answer, the sound of horses approaching reaches them, and Laurie ducks out of sight behind the building. 2 riders stop on the side of the cabin and dismount. The first is a short, stocky, middle-aged man with dark curly hair and a large mustache, and the other is tall and skinny with short blonde hair and tanned skin. "Jason, we need to talk," Ray says to the shorter man. Chapter 27. John had several tragedies on the ranch over the last few years. 2 of our younger members died, leaving behind a toddler. Laurie is an amazing little girl. I cannot bear the thought of sending her away, so I decided to take her under my wing. I know this is not something that you would have ever expected to hear from me, but I feel like life has given me another chance, and I need to take it before it's gone. Dad. Jason is standing near his horse, staring at Ray. John glances at the wood-handled revolver tucked into his holster on his right side. His much taller and skinnier companion climbs off his horse and steps up beside him. "What's going on?" Jason asks. "Victor's dead," Ray replies, his gaze locked on Jason. "What? What are you talking about?" "Someone has been spying on us and passing the information to Zeke," he says, glaring at him. John glances at Robert and notices that his hand is hovering above the grips of the pistol in his belt holster. Laurie is watching everyone, her eyes flitting from one person to another as she holds a rifle with both hands. "Are you saying you think it's me?" Jason asks. "You never thought that Zeke was guilty of killing Jennifer and attacking Anna." "That was a long time ago, Ray. Opinions change. How would I even get the info to him?" "I don't know. Maybe disappearing for a few hours and then just showing up again without any explanation," Ray replies. Jason pauses for a moment, and then he and Phil look at one another before quickly turning their gaze on Robert. In a flash, he draws his pistol and fires at Jason, who dives to the right, tucking and rolling on the dry, dusty ground. John pulls his gun and fires back, both shots going wide as Robert dashes behind the cabin. "Son of a bitch!" Ray shouts before running after him. "Ray!" John shouts as he joins the chase. Laurie darts behind the building a split second before Robert comes racing out from behind the cabin on a black mare. Ray races after him for a few yards, firing as he runs. "Ray!" John shouts as he comes galloping up to him on horseback, leading Ray's mount. He clambers into the saddle and they take off after Robert, racing across the gently rolling hills in the direction of the house. "We need to stop him before he gets to the farmhouse," John shouts. John spurs his horse in the side, and they speed up, tearing across the grassy fields. He raises his gun and fires, but the bullet goes wide. "Move it!" Laurie shouts as she tears past them on her horse. She's standing up out of the saddle, using the stirrups for support, the reins in her mouth. She slowly lowers her rifle as she leaves Ray and John in her dust and sights Robert through the scope. She can see the farmhouse in the distance, but she puts all her concentration on steadying her aim. Robert turns and looks behind him, just before firing. Something stings her side, but she keeps riding, ignoring the pain. She takes a breath in and holds it, adjusts her aim again, and fires. The rifle kicks her in the shoulder, and she watches as a cloud of red mist explodes in front of, and then all around Robert. A moment later, he falls from the horse, slamming into the ground, his body rolling over a few times before coming to a rest in a mass of yellow wildflowers. Laurie pulls the reins and slows her mount as she settles back into the saddle. She approaches Robert's body, stopping just a few feet away. She looks down at him and spits on his corpse. A second later, Ray and John come riding up. "Are you okay?" John asks. "I'm fine," she replies, as she slides her rifle back into its scabbard. "Are you sure?" he asks again, nodding toward her side. A blood stain is beginning to grow, slowly expanding on her shirt. "Oh, shit, I guess not." "Come on, let's get you back to the house," Ray says, riding up and taking her reins. She leans forward on the pommel and grunts. "Just don't fall off," he says, grinning at her. "I'll do my best." "How you doing?" John asks as he walks into the living room where Laurie is lying on the couch, her head propped up on a pillow. "I'm okay. Hurts, but I've had worse. Linda says I should be fine in a couple of days. Bullet went straight through, and not too deeply, luckily." "That's good. Now where the hell did you learn to ride and shoot like that? It was like something out of True Grit." "From your dad," she replies. Figures. He sits down on the edge of the coffee table and intertwines his fingers. "I don't really know how to say this," John says. She frowns at him and then pushes herself up slightly, wincing from the pain. "Then just say it." "It would have been better if we could have captured him alive," John says. "He might have had some information we could have used." She shrugs. "Oops," she replies, without much enthusiasm. And John shakes his head. "Did you talk to Phil and Jason?" "Yeah, Seems like Rob kept disappearing for hours and sometimes longer, then would just show back up like nothing had happened. I sort of got that. How did he become such a Zeke supporter? Well, seems like they had a lot of time to talk, being out there on their own. And while Jason came around to the truth, Robert went the other way, embracing the lies. I'm sure when he came into contact with someone from Zeke's group, they helped propagate those lies. They groomed him, basically. She shakes her head and sighs. I didn't enjoy killing him, she says. I want you to know that. I know you didn't. Killing someone is a hard thing. It affects a person, deep down inside, even if you don't realize it. They just sit in a comfortable silence for a few minutes, neither one speaking, until Laurie finally breaks the quiet. It did feel good in the moment, though, she says. I get that. I truly do. Mary walks into the room with a glass of water and a couple of pills in her hand. Hey, how you feeling? She asks, handing her the water and the medicine. I'm okay, thanks, she replies. So, are you going to be up for attending Victor's memorial? John asks. Of course I am. There's a meeting afterward with everyone. I'd really like you to be there, he says, before standing and placing his hand on her shoulder. Ray is getting it all organized. Should be ready in a few hours. Just let me know and I'll be there. John squeezes her shoulder gently and starts to head out of the room, when Max suddenly darts in and runs over to Laurie, licking her hand and wagging his tail wildly. Take it easy, Max. It's okay, Laurie says, rubbing the top of his head and laughing. All right, we'll see you out there, John says. You got it. She pushes herself up a bit more, using one of the pillows to support her back, wincing again as the stitches in her side pinch her hard. Max jumps up on the couch next to her and lays down, resting his head on her leg. She pets his head gently, running her hand all the way down to his tail. You don't look too bad, Anna says as she walks into the room. Yeah, it's not as bad as they're making it out to be. And I'm sure you're not downplaying it at all, she says, grinning at her. Of course not, she replies with a smile. I heard about what you did, Anna says, her expression darkening. I just did what I had to do. Well, someone needed to pay for what happened to Victor. Yeah, but someone else needs to pay more. You got that right, Anna says, as she touches a small, long-heeled scar on the side of her neck. Chapter 28. John, got the big house all buttoned up today. It looks even better than I was imagining, considering it was put up by a bunch of amateurs. I know your mom would have loved it. I painted it in that blue that she was always asking me to paint our house. We're going to try and get the inside done before winter gets here. Sure wish you were here to see it. Dad. Ray stands in front of the crowd gathered by the small patch of trees between the cornfields and the house. It's a calm and peaceful location, shaded from the sun and shielded from the worst of the wind by the house and barns. A simple wooden coffin is suspended over an open grave. 6 other graves are situated under the trees, each one marked with an ornately carved marker in the shape of a cross. John, Mary, and the kids are standing off to the side, with Max sitting quietly at their heels. Thank you all for coming, Ray says, after clearing his throat. Once again, we are gathered in this beautiful spot for a somber occasion, one that some of us have attended too many times. He pauses for a moment before continuing. Victor was a good friend and a brave man. He was always quick with a burn, he says. And several in the group chuckle. But he was the first to defend any one of us, and he was taken far too soon. Today, we lay our friend to rest, and we hope this will be the last one of these sad gatherings that we will need to have for many, many years. He nods, and Greg, Phil, Jason, and Anna slowly lower the coffin into the ground. There are a few sobs from some in the crowd, but most of the faces of those in attendance are stern rather than sad. John looks over at Laurie as she sits in a chair at the back of the crowd, and she catches his eye. He gives her a nod of the head, and she returns the gesture. "We have food in the house if anyone is interested," Ray says. "We're having a meeting outside the main house in 1 hour. I would like everyone to be there." The crowd breaks up, and Mary takes the kids back to the main house, accompanied by Linda and a few of the others. John walks over to Ray and places his hand over the old man's shoulder and nods. "That was good," John says. "I didn't know him well, but all the words you said were honest and true." "So what are we going to do about it?" Anna asks as she steps up to them. "That's what we're going to talk about at the meeting," Ray says. "We've already been doing some of it," John adds, reinforcing the main gate and digging the pits between the trees along the road. "That doesn't seem like much," Anna says, frowning at him. "There's going to be more to it," John says. "Trust me." She nods and then walks away, a sour expression on her face. "She wants revenge," Ray says. "Revenge is a dangerous game," John replies. "We all have a decision to make today," Ray says, as he stands on the porch addressing all of the remaining members of the group, except for Dean and Stasia, who are on guard duty at the front gate, and Phil, who is on watch in the tower on the top of the hill between the crop fields. "I might say there is a war coming, but I think it's more accurate to say that war is already upon us. We've lost one of our own. And if not for John, we would have been burying more than just Victor," he says, looking over at him. John nods, and then looks out across the crowd, making brief eye contact with a few of them. "I am not a warrior," Ray says. "I'm a farmer. But I am willing to fight to defend this place, and anyone who wants to join me is welcome to do so. And anyone who wants to leave is welcome to do that as well, without judgment." There are a few quiet murmurs that drift through the crowd, but no one walks away. "With that being said, I'm turning over the defense of our home to John. He has the experience we need, and he has already shown his willingness to not only defend it, but to put himself at risk to save others," Ray says, before stepping back and nodding in John's direction. John sighs and steps up to the edge of the deck and gazes across the crowd. "Some of us are not going to make it through this," John says. He doesn't say anything else for the next few seconds, and many in the crowd begin looking at one another, muttering amongst themselves. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to be honest. As Ray said, we're already in a war, and our enemy is willing to do whatever it takes to win. So we need to be willing to do the same. If you feel like you can't do that, then you need to leave. This may be your only chance to get away before things get ugly." He pauses again, waiting for the crowd to thin out, but no one moves. "Good. We've all seen how far Zeke is willing to go to win. He will kill you in cold blood and step over your corpse to take this place as his own," John says, before glancing at Laurie. She nods, a grim expression on her face. "But we have two things going for us. We are defending our home, which gives us something truly important to fight for, and as of today, we have cut off Zeke's flow of information thanks to Laurie, which was giving him an advantage. Now, let's talk about the outside world for a moment. Normally, we could go to the authorities, lodge a complaint, and Zeke and his followers would be rounded up, arrested, and jailed. But with this EMP episode, we are on our own. We can't expect to have any help arrive anytime soon. And if we try and wait for it, we will lose everything. So we've already started working on improving the defenses of this place, but we have a lot of work to still do, in a very limited time span. Some of us don't know how to fight, Delia says. We'll sort that out. There are other things that you can do to help. First aid, running messages, that kind of thing. Do we have enough weapons? Jason asks. John looks over at Ray, and he nods. Apparently we do, John says. And anyone who wants to learn how to shoot, we can teach you. How many people does Zeke have? Greg asks. That we don't know, John replies. At least 4 less than he did before, Laurie says as she stands up and walks over to John's side, grimacing from the effort. I can tell you that his people are cowards, John says. At least from what we have seen. But even a large number of cowards can overwhelm a small force of brave individuals. Do you think we can win? Delia asks. I think if we're smart, if we band together and fight as one, if we're brave and strong and we stay united even when things seem dark, we can. You're asking a lot of a bunch of farmers, ranchers, and simple people, Jason says. I know we are, but that's where things stand. We can run away, or we can stay here and fight for what's ours. What say you? Laurie asks as she steps forward, leaning on one of the posts, sounding like Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings. One by one, the crowd begins raising their hands, each person holding the hand of at least one other, forming a human chain. All right, then. I would suggest that everyone gets as much rest as you can tonight. It's going to get busy, John says.